Thank you all for standing by, and welcome to today's webinar, HashiCorp and AWS, Integrating Vault Enterprise with CloudHSM. Please feel free to type your questions during the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available after post-processing, usually within 2 days. Our speakers today are Lance Larson, a Senior Solutions Engineer from HashiCorp, and Trevor Hanson, Partner Solutions Architect from AWS. And with that, we'll get started. Go ahead, Lance.
Thanks, Peter. My name is Lance Larson. I'm a Senior Solutions Engineer here at HashiCorp in San Francisco, and I'm excited to talk to you all a little bit today about Vault, some of our commercial offerings, and we're going to be focusing specifically on Vault with Cloud Auto Unseal using Amazon KMS and Cloud Auto Unseal with Amazon's managed CloudHSM service, and how this is going to offer you automated unsealing and also some additional protections for your data at rest. So diving right in, just a little bit of a precursor here on Vault. So when we looked at the traditional way that we deployed applications, our infrastructure was very static and consolidated. We had an application platform, various flavors of OS, RHEL, Ubuntu, whatever it might be, where our applications run, and it was in a very tight network perimeter. And the infrastructure that it actually ran on was very static. It was either bare metal or maybe VMware and some virtualized infrastructure where those applications ran. And now what we're seeing is this move towards the private cloud, towards AWS, to potentially even multiple clouds. And you might have a scenario where 70% of your workloads are in AWS, you have 20% of your workloads still in your data center, and then you have that last 10% split up between those other clouds. And in this environment, that network perimeter is not very well defined, and we understand what the risks are if you leave key API tokens, unencrypted passwords and plain text files, have credential information split across multiple flavors of configuration management. These are all problems when we're in a zero trust environment, and that's what the hybrid data center and going to public cloud really looks like. So with that problem statement, boiling those challenges down in the cloud, really we have 3 things. The first thing is eliminating that secret sprawl I talked about. How do we get all that privileged material that's in all those different places into one place, like Vault, where we can provide governance and compliance and meet our InfoSec needs. And once we've done that and we have this material centralized, how do we store any kind of secret, whether it's just a static KV string, or even getting to more dynamic secrets like short-lived ephemeral AWS keys? These are challenges that I think Vault solves really well. And at the end of the day, when you're trying to deploy software in this new environment, just buying new tools or switching tools isn't going to necessarily solve those challenges. You need to bring developers, operators, and InfoSec to the table to work together to ship apps when you used to build an application shipped over 6 months, and now you might be shipping 3 releases a day. And I think Vault is one of the first tools of its kind to really do this in a way that brings those people to the table in a way that meets all their individual needs. So the core use cases that we offer with Vault are access, secrets, and encryption. So access would be things like short-lived SSH certs. Secrets could be dynamic secrets, again, short-lived. AWS credentials is a great example, or just KV, right? Stuff, passwords, things that aren't dynamic that you just stick in the Vault that applications or human beings can get access to. And we also offer encryption services. So these would be things like just having an application that authenticates with Vault, swaps its plain text for a ciphertext, and then you can go put that data in Postgres or some other environment. Talking about our view, open source versus enterprise, really, Vault open source is about the individual. It's about the developer. It's about that person, he or she, solving those use cases around the core security problem that it might be, whether it's a developer problem, an operator problem, or an InfoSec problem. It's sort of just that one person. And as we move towards Pro and Premium, these are the features where large organizations have different needs, whether it's around collaboration and operations or governance and multi-data center, the community and the enterprise has different needs, and this is where we align our Pro and Premium offerings for Vault. So breaking this down a little bit by Vault features. In the open source, I think these are things that pretty much everyone who's touched Vault is familiar with. Again, all the core use case stuff will be in the open source. Enterprise, Pro, and Premium, this is where we're going to be spending a lot of time today. And we're going to be looking at two specific features. We're going to look at Cloud Auto Unseal with Amazon KMS, and we're going to look at HSM Auto Unseal on AWS as well. With the Cloud HSM service that's managed. And we're going to be drilling into these features a little later in our live demo. And Trevor is also going to be talking about them in detail and why the offerings on Amazon are really awesome to consume. And we're super excited to have this integration today that's adding a lot of value for our customers, and that we're going to show you here at the end of the hour. So talking a little bit about drilling into these features. So really, Vault, unsealing the cryptographic barrier, seal wrapping, what this boils down to is methods of protecting the root encryption key for Vault, but also with seal wrapping, and this was announced in Vault 0.9, how do we give additional protections for our data at rest? So this method of unsealing Vault, I think everyone who, again, has touched Vault and open source would be very familiar with. The actual encryption key is stored at rest with the data. And when you split that master key into shards and you use human operators to put those together, you're essentially constructing the master key. And then the master key can go grab those encryption keys, and then you can start decrypting the data. So this is your option when you're using open source Vault. So the next two, these are different, and these have awesome integrations with AWS that we're going to show you. So the first one is the Cloud Automated Unseal. So in this method, today we support multiple clouds, Google and AWS. This is really easy to get rolling. On Amazon, we're going to show you in a bit here, but essentially what you're doing is you're no longer giving that master key to humans. You're using Amazon's KMS to store the master key there, and then you can provide the Vault with credentials, so it can actually go up to Cloud HSM and go get the master key. There's no human beings in this flow to do the unsealing. So if you have needs for a more ephemeral Vault and you want these to be able to restart at 3 in the morning and unseal themselves without having to PagerDuty or get operators involved, this is an awesome option if you feel like in your environment you can protect the credentials to go out to talk to KMS. And the next feature is Vault with HSM, and this worked on AWS's older classic Cloud HSM service, and I've also tested it, and we have customers testing it with the new AWS managed Cloud HSM service. So again, we can protect the master encryption key instead of having human beings constructing that. It goes into the HSM, and then when the Vault boots up or restarts, it'll do a pin and slot authentication to actually reach out, authenticate to the HSM, and get that master key. And what's awesome about both of these methods is we talked about the master key protection, but with seal wrapping, we can essentially round trip the data one more time through either Cloud KMS or Amazon Cloud HSM. And so not only is the data protected at rest by Vault's cryptographic barrier, it's also protected by either KMS or HSM. So if you have a FIPS 140-2 level 3 HSM that you're consuming managed from Amazon, you'd essentially have to compromise the private keys on that environment to get to any of the data at rest in Vault. And that's an awesome story for your regulators, for the InfoSec conscious people in your org who, again, are looking for a better story around compliance. And Amazon, what's awesome is it offers this to you in just such an easy way to consume. And Trevor's going to boil that down in his bit. But again, super excited about this integration, and I'm really excited to see what our customers, their wins, how they're able to improve their compliance stories with Vault and AWS. So I think we talked a little bit about the feature, and we're going to show it, but really, why is AWS an awesome option? And I think sharing some stories from the customers that I've been working with on AWS, the Cloud HSM, KMS, it's a highly available option for this unsealing activity. There's a low barrier to entry and cost. You get programmatic access and administration, managed backup and restore. And I think the last part is extremely critical. And when we look at Vault, in our older releases, when we didn't have seal wrapping, we essentially you would talk to the HSM very little, right? As an example, when the Vault first started, it would go get its master key from the HSM, and that was really the extent of the conversation. But now when we talk about seal wrapping and the additional round trips to put that data at rest and give it that extra encryption wrapping, now your Vault is going to be accessing this piece of infrastructure frequently. And if you're a massive organization and you have tons of HSMs and you're familiar with building a robust and highly available infrastructure around it, that's great. But not everyone can do that. And if it's going to be the weakest link in the chain. If your HSMs aren't highly available, that is going to potentially degrade your Vault service. And if you're running that as a large shared service with thousands of microservices and hundreds of developers relying on it, you're going to run into issues. So I think, again, AWS manages so much of this for you that you don't have to be a global 2,000 mega security conscious organization to go out and get HSMs that are highly available that you can rely on. Amazon is going to give this to you in a way that's consumable. They're going to manage it for you. And it's super easy to get started on this integration and dev and test. And then really, again, having it managed for you in production and not having to be an expert to get a highly available, robust infrastructure to support your Vault story, whether it's around KMS or Vault HSM for FIPS, as an example. So just talking about a few people who trust Vault today. There's many people out there using Vault, but the people we can talk about publicly in this, so SAP Ariba, New Relic, Barclays, Citadel, Spacebright, Credit Karma, Lotto New Zealand. These are all customers who've had tons of success with Vault. And I also added Leidos there at the bottom, who evaluated our HSM integration for FIPS conformance and in their audit of our integration around critical security parameters for both key storage and transport. They said we conform to the FIPS 142 specification. So that's all I had, and Trevor is I'm gonna get the demo ready to show you guys here at the end of the hour, and now Trevor is gonna dig into the Cloud HSM service, talk about it in much more detail, and how it's gonna create a lot of value for you on the Amazon cloud.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm Trevor Hanson. I'm a partner solution architect with Amazon Web Services, and I'm really excited to have you guys on the call today with us. And I'm really glad to be part of this discussion with HashiCorp and the amazing product that they're developing around Cloud HSM. In this segment of the webinar, I'd like to give you a bit of an overview on what is Cloud HSM. I'd like to highlight some of those benefits. This is going to be a bit of an overview. And as always, we have additional details in documentation, and there's also a question opportunity later on in this webinar. So what does AWS currently offer at the moment? We have two solutions where you can securely control and use your keys in AWS. This is Cloud HSM and KMS. Cloud HSM provides you with a dedicated FIPS HSM, and this is under your exclusive control, which is accessible within your VPC. AWS Key Management Service is a multi-tenant managed service for your keys. KMS lets you enforce who can use your keys, when they get rotated, and who can manage them. And KMS is also integrated into several of the AWS services, and you can leverage this functionality out of the box. I'd highly recommend that you go and check the documentation for KMS. Both of these services offer a high level of security for your cryptographic keys. However, today's talk is more focused on Cloud HSM. So what is Cloud HSM? Cloud HSM provides you with a single tenant FIPS 142 level 3 validated HSM, and this is provided to you within your VPC for you to generate, store, and use your keys. You have complete control over this HSM and flexibility in developing the applications that use them. And as we're demonstrating today with HashiCorp's Vault Enterprise, this is an amazing opportunity to leverage this Cloud HSM. This can also include applications that require HIPAA or PCI compliance, and additionally, security-sensitive workloads. So just before we dive into CloudHSM, we've launched the second generation of CloudHSM in August 2017. The new service provides the fully managed HSMs in the AWS Cloud, which is our hardware security modules. It makes it easier for you to use them and more affordable because there's no upfront cost anymore with the new CloudHSM. The first generation of the service that has been based on the SafeNet Luno HSMs is now called CloudHSM Classic. This remains available and unchanged for any users currently using CloudHSM Classic. We do have FAQs for users that are still currently using CloudHSM Classic, and you can follow the link that I've included on the screen that you can see there. Today's webinar is focused on the features and use cases of the new CloudHSM service. So customers are using CloudHSM obviously for their strong security of their keys, high performance cryptographic acceleration, or both of those. And CloudHSM supports a wide range of cryptographic algorithms and operations and key lengths. You can use CloudHSM to support a variety of different use cases and applications. And just to highlight some of those, customers are currently using this for your TLS and SSL offloading. They're using it for public key infrastructure and certificate authorities. You can also use this for database encryption. There is loads of documentation around that in the AWS docs around CloudHSM. There is also your document signing and your digital right management. So this is a quick look at the performance that you can expect from a CloudHSM. In the example of the SSL offload case, you can expect each of those HSMs to provide you about 1,000 transactions per second that you can store up to 3,500 keys. You can scale up that cluster to 32 HSMs, and we'll be diving a bit more into how that clustering actually works and how we handle that high availability for you. This doesn't increase the capacity since the HSM is a carbon copy of the other HSMs in that cluster. However, this does provide increased throughput so that you can achieve, for example, up to 32,000 RSAs, which is your sign and verify operations for a single endpoint within your cluster. That is obviously within your VPC. It's important to note that when your application is not in use, the new CloudHSM service does allow you to scale down that cluster to 0 instances. And then, as always, we have backup as the highest priority. This is part of that process that we cover. So the backups are done automatically in the background. These are stored with KMS in S3, and we'll be touching base on that shortly. So now let's take a look at the benefits of using our AWS hardware security modules. So CloudHSM provides you secure access to create and enforce users, your policies, and ensure the high security. You can also create fine-grained access management for up to 1,024 unique users. This allows you to really customize based on your different requirements. And I like to think of users being containers. If your users are creating keys, it is only visible to that user. However, you can share those keys with up to 8 users within that HSM. And obviously, when you start looking at developing applications that are going to leverage that HSM, you can interact with that via API. An essential aspect to remember is AWS has no access to the encryption keys. We also have no visibility into the users and policies in that HSM. This is entirely under your own control. So just to touch base on the scalable and the ease of management, being in AWS, the HSM is fully managed. And this includes, the high availability clustering. We do that automation of the backups on the back end for you into S3, as mentioned, using KMS to encrypt that. We also cover that load balancing between the HSMs in the cluster, and this allows you to be able to scale from that 0 to 32 HSMs within that cluster, and we handle that automatic failover. So if any of those instances become unresponsive, then we'll actually handle that replacement for you. A huge benefit of the new AWS CloudHSM is there is no longer that upfront cost, and it's a simply pay-as-you-go model per an hour. And this, is a huge benefit because you can scale that down to 0. When it comes to the backups includes the keys. It also includes a full configuration of that HSM, including the users and policies. And each of the new HSMs are pretty much a perfect clone of that HSM sitting in S3. If HSM should ever fail for any reason, it is a replacement that happens automatically on the back end from that backup. So when we go into the next aspect, I just want to run over the 0 configuration and the high availability and what that looks like. So let's take a look at that. So some of the core concepts that I'd like to first highlight is the clustering aspect. So that cluster isn't, each of those HSM modules are essentially a copy of each other, and that's scaling from 0 to 32 essentially allows you to add additional throughput to that cluster. So each of those instances, and I'll show you in actual breakdown in an architecture diagram that we have following on this, is, uses the policies, the keys are essentially replicated across those HSMs, and those can also be, spanned across the different, availability zones and subnets based on high availability and obviously redundancy that you'd like to put in place. Something to mention is this is currently, it's accessible within that single region, and cross-region replication is currently not supported. However, we highly recommend, as we always do, is to keep an eye on our What's New page, as well as our documentation around any updates on that, especially being a new and exciting service that we offer. So this is how it will essentially look in your AWS console. The AWS CloudHSM is accessible via your console. You can simply, with the click of that button, you can add an additional CloudHSM to that cluster. You can also reduce it via selecting that one of those and actually spinning that down. But something I wanted to highlight is around the monitoring side. So you also have access to CloudWatch metrics on that cluster. We collect metrics around the cluster's health, the HSM's health, the memory utilization, and the session counts. This allows you to create custom alarms and use that to scale up and down if you would like to use that customization. However, we do handle some of the high availability in the backend for you. One of the things to note is we have no visibility into the communication that you have to that HSM that occurs over that end-to-end encryption channel. So, however, you will be able to see, CloudTrail history to API calls to that service on AWS. So let's take a quick look at, how that clustering works. And, as you can see, you've got a Cloud HSM cluster there. We've got 2 Cloud HSMs, which is that hardware security module sitting as an endpoint in your VPC. And one thing to note is they're in active sync. They're continuously, sitting in the back and replicating. And this, this will have that load balancing between the two. So if you do expect, a scaling event, you maybe went to the console and you clicked in and you want to add an additional instance to that, or maybe you've got an API call that ran, or you've got a scaling event based on an event that you have. This will fire off that backup workflow, which will essentially create that carbon copy of that Cloud HSM. This will once again be stored securely in S3 using KMS. Then what will happen is, we'll add an additional Cloud HSM to that cluster. Once that reports in healthy, we'll start that restore process. You'll see in that restore process, you'll see that that instance is actually going into that active sync. And once that is actually in sync with the other Cloud HSMs, we'll make that available to your VPC, and the availability and the load balancing will start balancing out across those Cloud HSM clusters. So as we always recommend, you really have to leverage those different subnets and availability zones within a region, just like you would have your application in, taking advantage of these availability zones and creating, those subnets. You would have, your application sitting across each of those subnets, and being, Cloud HSM having those ENIs available in those different subnets, you can, span across those availability zones. From a production point of view, we highly recommend that you have at least 2 of those subnets spanned across 2 or more availability zones. And this just, adds that high availability and best practices based on, our white papers. So just to wrap up, and looking forward to the demo that we're about to show you on how you can actually integrate and leverage this Cloud HSM and AWS. I just wanted to highlight some of the main benefits that we have around Cloud HSM. So the first thing to really lock in is that pay-as-you-go model. You no longer have that upfront cost which you had with our AWS Cloud HSM Classic. It is a lot more scalable. You have a lot more flexibility, and you can actually just like you'd leverage that scalability around your instances in your application or being able to scale services based on demand. You can really leverage from that 0 HSMs in a cluster all the way up to 32 to be able to cater for any workloads that you have at that point in time. As mentioned, the backups are fully automated and they are stored stored securely in S3. Now with the additional security with Cloud HSM, we're now FIPS 142 level 3 validated. There is also additional documentation on how you can set up the two-factor authentication. I highly recommend that you check that out if you're going to be testing it out. And another thing to highlight is the development of the environment is built on open source standards. And this is something that allows you to be able to not worry about that lock-in capabilities, because you can actually move across into anything that's your common HSM. And then the last thing, the thing that we're really proud about is that high availability that happens automatically in the back end. However, you can scale up and down based on your own custom metrics. You can also achieve this by going to the console and simply clicking on adding or removing an HSM to that cluster, and you can also achieve this via an API. So the next aspect is the availability, and this is something that we made available in all the regions where we had HSM Classic. And this is something that we obviously going to continue trying to make available to nearer to wherever you need these services. This is something that is an amazing opportunity, because when you have no instances sitting there, you're not paying for that usage, and you're paying per an hour for the HSM. So this is something that's a massive benefit for you to be able to really start testing, playing around, and seeing if if there's a good fit. And yeah, I really look forward to seeing this demo and how you can actually integrate with that. This was a very quick overview on what is Cloud HSM and what's the difference between our Cloud HSM Classic. And if you have any further questions, you can always reach out to me at a later stage via LinkedIn, or we have multiple different channels where you can get in contact with us. And I'm glad to have you guys on the webinar with us today.
And with that, we'll let Lance go ahead and run the demo.
Thanks, Trevor. That was some great insight there. And now we're going to dive right in. So I have a cluster created, and to Trevor's point, I mean, this is just incredibly easy to do. So I have, and again, this is not designed to be a best practices architecture. I have my client instance that talks to the HSM in the same VPC, and I actually have my HSMs in the same subnet as well. So this is, again, a demo environment that we're showing, but I mean, even creating an HSM is as simple as, again, programmatic access command line API, but let's see here. That's funny. That usually works for me. I did that like 30 times yesterday. Live demos are always fun. So in any case, that is strange, but we can just dive right in, and I'm going to give that a try here at the end. I'm not actually sure what the issue is there, but I did test this Vault stuff and ran through it, so we should be able to show that. So diving right in, I have a few Vault configurations here, and I actually have a client instance set up that's connected, and then we can actually verify that we have an active connection to the HSM by checking these slots. So on my client instance, when you install this, you get the Cloud HSM library at this location, and we can validate that it is there. So this looks good, and I'll just blow this up on the screen so you all can see it a little better. So I have a good connection to the CloudHSM, and I can go ahead and check all the slots, and I can see that this looks good. So we'll start with the HSM, and then we'll go to KMS. But if we want to look at what that actual HSM configuration looks like, it's here. So we have a seal block that corresponds to the CloudHSM. This is the slot for the CloudHSM, and then we have our pin. And we have our pin, which is in CloudHSM world. This is a combination of the user that we specify, and then also the password. And I really also love the management interface that AWS gives us to do this. So if I go to the client instance, I can go ahead and connect to the management interface. And I'm just going to show this really quickly here. So we can connect to our HSM, and you can see here that this is that 207. You can connect to any of these because they're all replicated. So we're on this 207 address, and from there we need to enable encryption just so we can talk securely over the channel. And then if we do that, we can list all the users that we have. So for this integration, what you want to do is you want to create a crypto user type of CU, and then you can give it whatever username password that you want. I gave it vault and then password 1. So that's what is that's what comprises this pin. And there's a few other things in here for these keys. Essentially, I'm telling Vault to go out and create a new key on the HSM instead of generating one ahead of time and pointing at that. But these are all options. This is very configurable, and you can go out and check the Vault config on our website to see all the different options you can do here. So this all looks good. And then at this point, we can go ahead and start our Vault. So let's start with the HSM config. And my goal here is I want to demystify a little bit of what the seal wrapping actually looks like. And then we could show restarting this process and that, this automated unsealing happens. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to just understand that this isn't black magic. It's a very elegant integration that leverages these cloud services. But at the end of the day, what you're going to get is this encrypted layer at rest, and that's what we're going to show. So I have Vault 095. Let's get out of that. I have Vault 095 on my Ubuntu box, and we can go ahead and start with that same configuration I just showed you. And if we look at the logs, we'll see this looks good. Vault server configuration, we're connected to, we're using the AWS HSM library, and we have PKC S11 seal enabled. And we don't have to pay attention to some of these other things. But the important thing here is if you get to this point, you've got a good connection with your HSM. So now we have to actually initialize the Vault. And I'll show this in the UI. The Vault's actually not initialized. And what this process is doing is you're basically creating a recovery key if you need to roll these kind of master recovery keys, etc. But initializing the Vault will basically go ahead and create all the entries in the storage backend, and then we can go ahead and compare some of these values. What does a seal wrapped entry look like? What does a not seal wrapped entry look like? And you could see at rest what your data looks like. So I have the command here to initialize the Vault, and I can go ahead and do this on the client instance. And I get my recovery key back, and I get my initial root token. And these are what I'm going to use to log into the Vault. Obviously, in a real environment, you would want to protect these with extreme care. But since this is a dev environment, we don't necessarily have to do that. So I'm just going to copy these out to Adam, and then we can go ahead and log into the Vault. And we'll be brought to our kind of home landing page here where you get self-service access to Vault. And for some of you, this is probably your first time seeing the UI, as this is an enterprise feature. So I've got kind of again, I'm logged in as root. I can see sort of all the mounts that are there by default. I don't have replication enabled, but for DR and scaling, I would be able to see all my clusters managed here. I also get access to leases. Again, since I logged in as a root token, there are no leases, but applications or human beings logged in, you'd be able to see all their dynamic credentials here. I can manage policies. I've got access to some crypto tools like hashing, creating random bits. And then I can actually mount more mounts here. And that's what we're going to do. So if I want, I'm going to mount for this, I'm going to mount two KV value mounts. And we're going to create a seal wrapped entry, and we're going to create a non-seal wrapped entry. So the first one, we're going to mount this as wrap. And you see this checkbox on here. And again, this doesn't have to be done through the UI, but we are going, actually, let's start with a not wrapped example first. So I'm going to call this no wrap, and we're going to mount it. And then we can create a secret in here. And we're also going to call this no wrap so we can see it on the file system. Okay, cool. So now we've got a secret. So what exactly does this look like in Vault World? So I have mounted the storage, and I'm not using console. I'm not using Dynamo. I just have this written out to the file system because it's easy to see. So here's where all my Vault data lives. And I have this new mount path called logical, and I'm in logical, and when you're in logical, you can see all the mounts. There's a alias there for them. They're not in plain text. But if I look at this entry, I have that no app entry that I just created, and I can see that this is encrypted. So this is what the Vault cryptographic barrier, that kind of unsealing barrier looks like. I can tell because it has these 4 A's. So this entry that's sitting in here at rest actually is not seal wrapped at all. And we're going to do a comparison of this. So if I back out and I go back to logical, let's create another mount. We're going to do this now. And I'm going to call this wrap. And I'm going to target for seal wrapping. Or what did I call the other one? This doesn't matter. Okay, we'll just call it wrap. So if I have this called wrap, and now I have this box checked to enable this for seal wrapping. Once I mount the back end and create a secret, call this wrap toolbar. What you're going to see here is another entry. So we've got this new mount. And I see my wrap entry. And then now I have a longer encrypted string. And this now is actually been round tripped. Let me make this a little bigger. This now has been round tripped through the HSM. And actually sitting at rest, this data is protected by the HSM. So that's the key difference here. Even if you were to compromise this value and decrypt it, you would still it would just decrypt back to that barrier value. But that's what the additional protection is here. Not only would you have to compromise Vault's cryptographic barrier, but this additional layer at rest where the actual data is being round tripped through the HSM, this would have to be compromised. So hopefully showing this illustrates the differences between these mounts. Again, looking at these side by side, you've got wrap, and then you've got no wrap. And again, this is configurable. There are obviously performance, implications to round tripping all your data through the HSM. But again, Amazon being able to give these highly performant HSMs to you in a highly available configuration. Again, you don't have to be a massive company to get the benefits of this service. And I think Trevor did an awesome job highlighting all those points in detail of why that is. So we've shown this for the HSM integration. We can also show this for KMS. So going back to these files, I had the exact same configuration. I just redacted my secret key for the sake of the demo. But now instead of doing the PKCS11 seal, I'm doing the AWS KMS seal. And I've got some different authentication here. For the HSM, I'm doing pin and slot. For KMS, I have an access key to secret key that gives me access to this actual IAM key. But with seal wrapping enabled, we're going to see the same behavior. So if I go, I'm going to kill my vault. Oops. If I do that, okay. And then I'm going to clear out the storage so we can reinitialize it. And now we're going to start the vault again, but we're going to start it with the KMS configuration. So going back to my script, I will grab the start command, get rid of our old key. So this is the KMS one. And if you go ahead and look at this log, now we have a different seal type. So we have seal type of AWS KMS. Same thing, vault is not initialized. So we can go ahead and initialize it. If I'll now see that my UI vault's back in this initialize and unseal state. I like to use the command line, so I'm going to use that to do this piece of it. And now I've got some new recovery shares once again, and I've got an initial root token. And if I do this, we can log back in and we'll be at an empty vault. So let's go ahead and do that same exercise. I'm not going to explain the dashboard since we just did that. But if we go back into our temp vault where we're storing the data, I don't have any logical mounts yet because I haven't created anything. So I will first go back to the settings and we're going to mount 2 KVs. We'll mount no wrap first. And again, seal wrapping is not enabled. Create a secret called no wrap. Validate this entry in logical. And again, I can see, yep, that looks correct. So we've got that barrier entry. And if we go ahead and do the same thing with the, I think we're going to see a slightly different cipher here, but you will not see the barrier key. So if I mount another KV, I will call this wrap, and then we will call our secret wrap. And now I can validate this entry in our vault data store as well. So go back to logical, cat the wrap value. Again, a little bit bigger of a value here just because of the differences in the encryption between the HSM and KMS. But you can see that this value is seal wrapped and it's not that barrier entry. So let me back up. We can show them side by side. Oops. So looking at these side by side, we have wrap. Sorry, we have no wrap and wrap, and you can see this, and you can see the differences there. So again, what did we just learn? For both seal wrapping with KMS or CloudHSM. And again, you know, based on your regulatory environment, your needs, maybe seal wrapping with KMS is a better fit. Maybe you need HSMs under your direct control that are FIPS 142-level 3. But at the end of the day, Amazon is giving you all this power in an incredibly consumable way, and this Vault integration, you know, very agnostic in how we can swap these configurations out and support these almost seamlessly, you know, in our Amazon environment. So that is all I had today. I want to try this one more time. I'm not sure what I did to my environment. I'm probably the only human being on earth who managed to break this in a demo. But if I can spin one of these up just to watch it in action, let me log out and log back in here. But at the end of the day, I think, let's see here. Oh, that was probably why I just timed out of my session. So if I go back, let's hold on. I need to do a 2-factor here. And HSM cluster, create a new HSM in 1C. And now that I'm actually authenticated, I can see that this CloudHSM is in progress. And it's really that easy. And all the things that that Trevor talked about, and even looking at this integration, right, when I'm talking to the HSM. So going back to this PKCS11 command, just to show this. So this is the only connection that I have to the HSMs. I don't specify IPs. I don't do anything like that. The Amazon client that's running on this box, and I think I actually have the service for it. So you can see that this would work. Where is this in the documentation? So this client here, so I have this service, this CloudHSM client actually runs as a daemon in this environment. So if I stop it, as an example, oops. Sorry, I'm on Ubuntu, not Amazon Linux. So if I stop this client, and then I try my PKCS11 tool again, I'll see that now I don't have a connection. And this is what's driving my connection to the HSM. And I think to highlight why this is important, if I start it again, now I can connect back to the HSM. But to Trevor's point, as these services are coming online, and this is, it's extremely performant in how fast this happens on AWS, but it'll actually go and update the client. So not only would I see my Vault user if I connected directly to the management interface here, but once this HSM comes into rotation, the client automatically knows this client, a combination of this service, right, the CloudHSM client and the PKCS11 library. These work together to manage this high availability in a completely abstract way. So to Trevor's point, if any of those HSMs goes offline, if you lose an availability zone, whatever that may be, you don't have to hard code, or you're not making configuration changes. This is all just completely managed by the HSM service, which I think is awesome. And again, the number one thing that I've seen my customers struggle with is, they have a really robust architecture built around Vault, but they're just not as comfortable, or they're getting kind of into the HSM space for the first time, or they just don't have the people to maintain a high availability, HSM architecture that's as easy to manage as we just saw here. So I think, again, if you're one of those folks and you want access to this, and you have a good investment in the Amazon cloud, it's extremely easy to get started with this. It provides awesome functionality, and operators and InfoSec and developers, we can all use this in a way that's not disruptive to shipping software at speed. So Trevor, again, thank you so much for all the helpful info that you brought today. Peter, that's all I had. I think we've got about 10 minutes left, which is when we plan to start the Q&A. So this is all I had.
Thank you, Lance, and thank you, Trevor, for both of your presentations. At this time, we do have a couple of questions. The first one I have is actually for Trevor. One of our guests was asking, how much control will I have over the key operations in KMS versus Cloud HSM?
Excellent. Thanks a lot for doing that amazing demo. I was worried when I saw that that error. Live demos are always an amazing opportunity to show how good you at what you're doing. But yeah, so as I mentioned, Cloud HSM is our new version where we actually manage that high availability, and we've also improved that FIPS 120 compliance for you to level 3. Once you've created that, or you created that secure end-to-end connection to your HSM cluster, that is entirely under your control. We have no access into administration of that HSM. We only administering the actual availability of that and exposing that into your VPC. So once you actually have a connection to that HSM through the client, that control is entirely up to you to administer everything from the configuration to the usage of it, the users, the policies that get applied, as you would normally have your normal HSM on premise. So the control is, as I mentioned, is entirely up to you. We only have visibility and collecting data around the actual metrics on the underlying hardware. And yeah, so another thing to mention is there is loads of information around, especially under the compliance and the provisioning and the operations of our Cloud HSM. And moving from the classic just to the newly AWS Cloud HSM is actually focusing on that availability and making it a lot easier for you to provision and test and play around with the service. And I would highly recommend you go and take a look at the actual Cloud HSM landing page on AWS. We've got loads of details around the FAQs, and especially being a massive requirement under security and compliance. This is something that we've really highlighted and tried to answer all those questions on there. And it's something that I wouldn't be able to cover in 10 minutes alone. If anything is unclear there and you have additional questions, as I mentioned, you're more than welcome to reach out to me through LinkedIn or additional channels. And I'll be glad to put you in contact with the right people to be able to assist if you're going to be doing some testing or if you need some assistance around that. So I'm really glad you guys could join, and I hope that we've provided some, some insight into how you can leverage these services in the cloud. Cloud HSM obviously being built from the ground up in AWS, because your hardware modules being able to work at an enterprise scale in the cloud required quite a bit of configuration, and we wanted to make that simpler for you, where you wouldn't have to go and have that loads of additional resources on your end to administer those, where we just make it we handle that heavy lift and we handle the availability for you, so you can focus on that actual engagement with the KMS. With the HSM. So I hope that you walk away, wanting to at least test it and give it a play, especially with, HashiCorp's Vault Enterprise. That's something, it's an amazing product that they provided. And it's something that, I was super excited to jump on this webinar today with you guys. So yeah, as I mentioned, there's no upfront cost. So there's, there's amazing opportunity for you to be able to just go and spin it up and give it a test. And, being hands-on, you have a lot more opportunity to understand what flexibility you have from an administration point of view. And if you're already working with HSM in some capacity, you'd be able to really, test the weight of it. So I look forward to hearing your feedback. And if you have any questions, please do reach out.
Thank you, Trevor. Lance, we did have a question for you as well about seal wrap. So does seal wrap re-encrypt a secret with the HSM that's already been encrypted by Vault, or is it a single encryption?
Yeah, it's a good question, and that's what I was trying to show. So that kind of 4 A's that prefix those first secrets, those are encrypted by Vault. And again, once you have that master key that you either, again, you construct from the open source Shamir sharding, or you get from a KMS like AWS KMS, or if you get it from the Cloud HSM, anything that goes into the storage will be encrypted by the barrier. And so that value is round tripped again through whatever mechanism that you have in the integration. So I showed both KMS and I showed Cloud HSM, and they had slightly different ciphertext, but it was the same principle. And that value is encrypted one more time. So the story that you're telling your regulators or anyone that is a stakeholder in this process is that those environments would have to be compromised for people to get access to your data at rest. And a managed Cloud HSM service by Amazon or Amazon's KMS, those private keys or those symmetric keys, being compromised is highly unlikely. So it's a really good story around the integration. And my goal was to try to show that by giving us a little bit of visibility into the storage on how those values were different.
Thank you, Lance. And along those lines, we had another question. Just if you could give a quick overview about the access tokens and how those are protected in order to unseal the vault.
Yeah, so, and again, Vault, we're very upfront about our security model, and you can read about it more on the Vault website. But if the question was around sort of the Vault tokens, those root tokens that I generated, by doing that kind of operator unseal, what we got was a plain text value, or not a plain text. We just got the token back, but you also have the ability to give a PGP key, like a public key as an example, and would return, or sorry, just a PGP key pairing. And what it would do is you could put the public part of that PGP key when you do that initialization activity, and it'll actually return you that root token in an encrypted fashion. So you could store those tokens, those kind of privileged recovery keys in a more public place, just because the people would have to use their PGP keys to actually decrypt them and then put them in the vault. So certainly you do not have to just have those tokens in plain text like I did, and all the documentation for how you can supply PGP keys to get an encrypted token back. That's all on our website for both the KMS and the Cloud HSM initializations.
Thank you, Lance. And we're running down on time here, so I do want to let everybody know that we do have lots of options available for additional information or documentation, or additional questions can be sent to us at webinars@hashicorp.com, and we will try to answer them. I want to thank Lance and Trevor for their time today, and thank all of you for your questions. I hope everyone enjoyed today's webinar and have a better understanding of how Vault Enterprise and Cloud HSM work together. Again, I want to thank our speakers for their time today. And finally, that I wanted to mention that once again that the webinar was recorded, and we will make the recording available on our website after post-processing. An email will go out to everyone who registered with the recording link. You can also keep an eye out on Twitter, where the recording link will be made available as well. Hope everyone has a great day, and goodbye.